Welcome to the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies for erotic engineering and seeding a world rooted in the truth of our desires, truth of your desires. The podcast and newsletters are presented by Cedar School, where we leverage the power of Black feminist practice, speculative fiction, and business development to imagine and build worlds and work worthy of our breath. If this is your first time tuning in, CETA is a school for wild world builders, queer radicals, and Black feminists with offerings supporting you inside your creative life of refusal. If you are a long time listener, welcome back and thank you for joining us. Y'all, after a much needed summer off, I'm excited to get back to the seasonal CETA School rhythm. This fall, I'll be offering an immersive Cedar World Retreat experience with weekly one-on-one sessions, supporting you with developing your own income generating offer with a deep, deep focus on four like key offer development milestones. Number one, developing, or I should say deciding on your offer, right? We make a decision. Number two, identifying your dream participant or your ideal client, however you imagine the folks you want to serve, your viewer, your reader, your audience. Right. Number three, we engineer your framework. This is the thing that is going to allow you to deliver impact with or without your presence, right? It's your process. It's your story arc of transformation. It's oftentimes the arc of transformation that you have gone through or the arc of transformation that you want to teach or offer to others. And then number four, we strategize your launch. We figure out how you're going to invite the people, how you're going to market this thing, how you're going to pitch it, sell it, generate income, right? And inside your personalized 4-week Cedar World Retreat experience, we will erotically engineer a paid offer tailored to your creative practice and your income goals. We'll talk more about the how to erotically engineer a paid offering in the brand new workshop happening on Tuesday, September 23rd at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Registration is completely free, y'all, and the link is in the show notes. And as part of the 4-week one-on-one Cedar World Retreat, you will receive lifetime access to the Cedar World course, which has guided over 100 Cedar School alumni on developing and releasing creative offers that financially support their practice. Create your own offer, right? To share your erotic skills and see the world rooted in the truth of your desire with us this fall. Again, link is in the show notes to learn more and join us. All right, y'all. We are in the point of the episode where we engage in our kind of like grounding podcast ritual, right? So before diving in, let's just give ourselves permission to breathe into the present moment, right? We're going to take a quick beat to become aware of our surroundings, to kind of like fully ground and get curious about what's happening inside of our sensorium. And the way we kick this off is we're going to take 3 deep, full belly breaths together. And in that pocket of pause, note something we can see, touch, smell, taste, hear, something we can feel beyond the senses we have language for. As we breathe and ground into this present moment and all that's going to be shared in this podcast episode and the kind of like bi-directional witnessing we're going to be doing together. So yeah, y'all, let's begin. 3 deep full belly breaths. Mm. All right. What was one thing that you were able to see, touch, smell, taste, hear, feel inside that pocket of pause, whether it was a moment of silence for you, whether you were able to close your eyes or not? Let's kind of check into what we just experienced and what's going on in our immediate environment. I know for me, if you are watching this on YouTube or Spotify, you may be able to see my kind of like working chair in the background. It's the chair that I often write in. It was the chair I was just writing in. And I usually move it out the way of the frame, but I was just like, for what? Right? I got a candle burning, got an incense burning, I got my water here. It is almost like becoming dusk where I am, and I'm excited to be here with you. Now, this is the point in the podcast where we check in on our mood and intention, right? Keeping in mind that our mood and intention kind of colors what it is that we're doing. And it behooves us to be intentional inside and aware of our intention inside of whatever it is we're doing. Because that can be a way in which we kind of can sculpt and shape our attention and even reclaim our power in some cases, which we'll talk a little bit about in today's episode. But if I check in on my mood and intention, y'all, my mood is I am feeling much more grounded after returning to a creative rhythm ahead of the fall equinox. And also, eclipse season is like really, it's bringing some clarity that I have prayed for. And part of it is like, okay, girl, I'm not gonna make you repeat yourself no more. Like I got it, message received, and the other part of it is like, wow, okay. Yeah, it's go time in a way that I had been craving, right? So I am feeling so grateful, so grounded, um and so clear and kind of recommitted to this rhythm. And I don't want to speak too soon, but hopefully y'all see me here at a more regular cadence because I do miss the rhythmic cadence inside of Cedar School, like the weekly podcast, the weekly newsletter. The seasonal retreats. Like it's something about that cadence and that rhythm that I do find grounding. It's a backbeat inside of my practice. And in during the summer, I kind of interrupted that beat a little bit just to take a step back and I'm excited to re-engage with that rhythm and re-engage with that beat a little bit more refreshed. But what's your mood? How are you arriving? Can you give yourself 3 seconds to feel what you feel without judgment? Let's pause and check in here. Now, let's check in on our intention, right? My intention inside this episode is to invite us to recalibrate inside our desire. As we search for safety, predictability, and control, we can find ourselves impulsively grabbing for the tools of white supremacy culture in an attempt to catch our breath and find our footing once more. Right? We extend deep, deep, deep compassion to ourselves for this reflex. With fascism, state-sanctioned violence, and the question of survival riding the air, it is no surprise that we may breathe in fear with our latest exhale. Inside this episode, or I want to say, I guess it's no surprise that we may breathe in fear with our latest inhale. But inside this episode, we exhale, right? Remembering the tools of white supremacy culture are incompatible with the worlds we are building. The classrooms were spinning up in midair. I can never say that word. apothecaries, right? Where that are getting their start in our gardens, growing into neighborhood pharmacies, and perhaps even the basements, right? We're turning into movie theaters, streaming nothing but love, love, love. And before we know it, we're impulsively picking up tools of a different kind, tools for tending to a culture of care where Black life is sacred and shared vulnerability is more appealing than isolating in fear. That's my intention behind recording this episode, is to recalibrate inside of that. What's your intention behind listening to this episode or doing whatever it is you're doing in this present moment, whether it is cooking, whether it is walking, whether it is driving somewhere? I'm going to pause and let you reflect on that. All right, y'all. We are 11 minutes into this thing. Let's get into today's episode. Number 86, retreating inside agency, inspiring desire instead of paralyzing fear. So maybe this is a story time, maybe this is just an intro, but yesterday while meditating in the park, something came up around retreating inside of fear. So I made an Instagram post on it, but I wanted to expand on it here. Like I know I feel it, so maybe you feel it too. Fear is so accessible right now. Like we could just reach out and grab it. It's almost like we don't even have to reach. It's right here. It's camped out right beside us. And that is no coincidence. Fascism also feels super accessible right now. State sanctioned violence is everywhere we turn. White supremacy, it's doing its thing, it's doing its job, it's showing up to work, and it is on time. I'm not going to say it's doing its big one because it's not impressive. Um, it's predictable, it's dull, it's suffocating, it's not doing it's doing its little one, that's for sure. But white supremacy does feel super accessible. And it does feel tempting to retreat inside the false sense of safety that is white supremacy culture. I keep saying white supremacy culture, right? White supremacy culture is a paper written by Tima Ukun and is described as a list of characteristics of white supremacy culture that shows up in our organizations. It's linked in the show notes, the paper, but inside it, she goes on to say culture is powerful precisely because it is so present and at the same time so very difficult to name or identify. The characteristics listed are damaging because they are used as norms and standards without being proactively named or chosen by the group. End quote. Right. So it's like this, it's this other backbeat. It's this other rhythm that is happening in the background. That oftentimes we haven't explicitly chosen, but we are like subconsciously subscribing to. So that's what this episode is about. But I want to list some of the characteristics here that Tima like raises and outlines in the paper. One is perfectionism, right? Which can show up in our writing processes and can be the thing that often stops us from starting or stops us from finishing. Sense of urgency is another one, which can show up in the fictitious timelines that we compare ourselves to when actualizing our desire, right? I should be here by now. At this big age, I should know how to X, Y, and Z, right? By this time I thought I would or I should, like the shoulda, coulda, wouldas of it all, can often kind of animate a sense of urgency. Quantity over quality, right? Worship of the written word is another one. Um, which is a reminder that we must weave our writing with our embodiment practices and relationships with the human and non-human world. Another one is only one right way. Another either or thinking. Progress is bigger, progress is more, right? Another one that she lists is fear of open conflict, and there's so many more. But I wanted to expand on white supremacy culture informed fear in this episode because it does feel like we're flanked by it, surrounded by it, making it difficult to breathe, making it difficult to move, making it difficult to access our desire, even. Sometimes it feels like the fear produced by white supremacy is camped out on all sides of us, but so is desire. So is our power. So is our agency. Our desire, our power, our agency are all also camped out right beside us, available to collaborate with at any time. And something I say inside of Cedar School is that our fear is always trying to teach us something. There is always a lesson on our desire embedded in our fear. Celine Simon of Slow Factory once told me, fear is an indication of desire. And I always think about that because it's so true, right? The collective fear that we may be feeling is an indication of collective desire, a collective desire to be witnessed in our wholeness instead of our severance, right? The pieces that we slice up and cut up for viewing and public display and consumption. What does it look like to be witnessed inside of our wholeness instead, right? Maybe we have a collective desire to get our needs met, right? Maybe our fear is wanting to, our collective fear is wanting to point us to a collective desire to have our vulnerability met with care and compassion. Right? 2020 was a similar moment. Fear was everywhere, but so was the desire to live. So, how might we practice retreating inside of our world building desire instead of fear inspired by white supremacy? I want to offer 3 things to consider when retreating inside desire instead of fear. Number 1, sacred solitude is different than fearful retreat, right? There is a move that we can make where we carve out moments in our days or our week to engage in sacred solitude in order to get curious about what fear is trying to teach us about our desire. Why am I clinging to that old way of working? Why am I craving that false sense of safety and isolation? Why am I clinging to overworking as a currency for connection? I got that currency for connection language from Des Davis, right? In sacred solitude, we may ask, why am I waiting or wanting, I should say, to turn away from the raw edges of vulnerability? Right? Is it because I actually long to be witnessed, embodying the full expanse of my power, but that audacity was punished in childhood? Inside of sacred solitude, we can get curious about these questions. Am I overworking as a currency for connection because I have a deep desire that I won't let myself believe, which is this: I will still be cared for inside my rest. I am still worthy of love inside my ease, right? Are my limiting beliefs resurfacing around generating income in my creative practice because I have this deep desire for financial stability, right? These are questions that we can get underneath of inside of sacred solitude. Again, this is different than fearful retreat because there is an element of mindfulness, right? And intentionality that we were talking about earlier. We aren't retreating in fear in a futile attempt to run away from our shadow, from the subconscious motivations that might be governing our actions. No, 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 no. We're turning toward the fear, facing it as a humble student and asking this teacher, what are you trying to tell me? This is a sacred reclamation of our power, our agency, and our energy. Another thing to consider when retreating inside of desire instead of fear is to remember, number two, to remember that isolation isn't easier. It's just a dead zone, right? We retreat inside of our zone of desire instead of fear by remembering isolation isn't necessarily easier. It's certainly less rigorous, right? Again, it's a dead zone. It seems safer and easier because nothing happens there. This is the alluring trick isolation plays on us. It seems appealing because it seems predictable. It seems controllable, which can have this temporarily soothing effect on our nervous system. This soothing sensation might last for a season, but living in alignment with our desire and our values is actually much more sustaining throughout the many seasons. Isolation isn't easier, it's just a dead zone, right? What do I mean by that? What do I mean when I say that? There is a way in which nothing happens in isolation or very little. Again, this is very different than sacred solitude. We can develop a practice of engaging in sacred solitude in order to emerge, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, allowing ourselves to share our ideas with others, allowing ourselves to be transparent and be held accountable, right? No longer in fear of open conflict. When our worldviews are stretched and challenged, it is actually quite expansive and erotic. It is generative. This positive social friction can inspire us creatively and activate our agency, which is, what creativity does. It's why we do it. Reminds us of our agency. Having our desires rub up against the desires of others is how imagination crystallizes into collaboration, which facilitates the building of new worlds and new realities. Actually admitting that we have needs and then doing the work of figuring out what those needs are while in relationship is world building work. That can't happen in isolation. Exploring our curiosity with others alongside the ideas of others, alongside the desires of others, increases our capacity to build worlds where isolation feels incongruent with aliveness. Nothing happens in isolation, so it feels easier, but it actually drains our energy because it has nowhere to go, no one or nothing to bounce off of. Okay. Speaking of our sacred energy, number three, maybe this is like the third thing I want to invite you to consider when retreating inside of desire instead of fear. And this thing is in the form of a question that I often ask myself. And it is this: are you tired or are you exhausted from underestimating your own power? And listen, sometimes it's both. Right. Sometimes we retreat inside fear because we're exhausted, we're weary. It's all too fucking much. Trust me, I get that. I feel some version of weariness every single day, and some days I just let myself feel it. I just sit with it. I observe it. I say, hey, friend, what you got for me today? But let's just breathe today. On other days, I remember my power is the most energizing, catalyzing force I know. When I'm facing burnout, I ask myself two questions. One, is it burnout or a willful disregard of your agency? Is it burnout or a willful disregard of your agency? And number two, have you asked for help? Have you asked for help, baby girl? Right? Because of course you're burned out if you haven't asked for help. It's impossible to do most of these things that we're trying to do alone. Inside white supremacy culture, there is risk. Let's be clear. There is risk inside choosing ourselves and deciding to depend on others. And I'm going to keep bringing up white supremacy because there's no way to truthfully talk about any of this without acknowledging systems of oppression. Right? I've been talking a lot inside of Cedar School about how kind of exhausting and dull and flat so many of the conversations around manifestation can be because it completely is almost disregarding the reality of the fear that our nervous system is like rightfully and understandably experiencing inside of systems of domination and Black Death. Right. But something I've also been saying inside of Cedar School is yes, the state is big, scary, and bad, but we way bigger. We way better, right? And every system of domination should be scared to see us coming, should be afraid, shaking in their boots to witness us reclaiming our agency and our power as we retreat inside of our desire. And of course, as I'm like scripting and preparing for this episode, I take a break, do a little scroll, a little stroll on the internet streets, the Instagram streets, and see a post from Trisha Hersey's Nat Ministry that reads, "Your gifts and talents will make space for you. You don't have to be violent to your body by overlooking, or she says, you don't have to be violent to your body by overworking to reach your goals." She says, burnout is violence. What you believe about labor is all a capitalist lie. You don't have to grind. Rest a little. It's a generative space. End quote. This isn't a podcast episode on burnout, but I think a lot of us are experiencing it, are feeling it. And I think it's connected to why our fear can keep us in loops of avoidance around actualizing our desire. I bring out burnout because I want to invite us to get curious about how the burnout we might be experiencing might be actually this kind of like fear that is inspired by all of the violence we've been made to witness over the last several years, truthfully, a lifetime. So again, fear can keep us in loops of avoidance around actualizing our desire. And our burnout might sound something like this: I can't activate my agency by making different choices because those different choices will require more work, and I don't have the capacity for anything more than what I'm already holding. I feel that. I hear that. Let's talk about it. There's this business owner, therapist, author named Simone Saunders. I'll leave her Instagram or the link to the post that I'm referring to in the show notes. But she made a post on how she's recovering from burnout as a person with ADHD through finding a rhythm instead of a routine. I love this framing of recovering from burnout by returning to a rhythm that is in alignment with our desire and the work we know we want to do, right? A lot of times it can be exhausting acting like we don't know what we want. We know the work we want to do. It's just going to require us to make different choices, right? And again, I love this framing of rhythm over routine because for me, as someone who also has ADHD, recovering from burnout has never meant completely clearing my calendar. I've done that. And it like all of the free time was actually more exhausting and draining, right? And of course, here, listen, y'all. I am not here to gaslight you inside of your burnout into creative action, right? Of course, rest and sleep are important. Like it's never giving that. Like it's never giving that we don't understand when the body is asking for us to slow down. Taking those cues is essential, right? We know that. But for me, I'll speak from the eye. A lot of times, pulling away from my rhythm of creative flow actually just becomes more exhausting because there's nowhere for my creative energy and power to express itself. And it is through that erotic expression, that erotic doing, that erotic rehearsal that I am actually energized. It is actually through like living out Black feminist theory that I find reasons to keep going. So I love that she invited us to consider finding our rhythm as a response to burnout. Rhythm over routine feels like an essential invitation in this time because there is a way in which routine can feel oppressive and regimented. There's a way it can invoke shame and actually trigger our perfectionism, right? Which is inspired by white supremacy culture, as we talked about earlier. If it's not followed to the T, right? So it's very different to say, I wake up at 5 a.m. to write every day, and then I go for a walk at 8 a.m., right? It's very different to say that than to say, I wake up after getting 8 hours of sleep. I wake up when my body wakes up. I decide to write for a couple of hours or for 30 minutes or for 500 words, whatever my decided benchmark is. And then after that's done, when I'm done with whatever my benchmark is that I've decided on, I go for a walk, right? That feels like a rhythm, that feels like a flow, that feels like a cadence, that feels like a desire stack of sorts instead of a regimented routine. The rhythm invokes flow. And this felt sense of a backbeat inside of our practice can actually act as this calming cadence that allows us to access our power and live out our desires in more pleasurable ways, ways that we return to again and again. Now, what does this have to do with the exhaustion of dismissing our own power, right? Let's return back to the common refrain. I can't activate my agency by making different choices because those different choices would require more work and I don't have the capacity for anything more than what I'm already holding. Sometimes activating our agency looks like figuring out what parts of what we're holding need to be released. So instead of thinking about retreating in fear because we're tired, because we're weary, and we think actualizing our desire is just going to equal more work, let us ask, what would it look like to find my rhythm inside of my desire? Remembering actualizing desire doesn't happen all at once. It's a practice. It's an altar of commitment we return to again and again, day by day, week by week. A lot of times, recovering from burnout requires rest. But after a while, it requires a reclamation of our power, a reclamation of our ability to make different choices, the power to say no, reclamation of the power to imagine otherwise, a reclamation of the power to lean on community, the power to shift our way of being. So often it is cultivating courage that creates capacity. And I use the phrase creating capacity a lot, but I just want to remind us this isn't about increasing our productivity. Again, we're moving away from capitalism, away from white supremacy culture. Creating capacity isn't about increasing our productivity, it's about the agency alignment inspires. That felt sense of agency helps us build worlds we can bear and inspires us into rigorous action inside of work worthy of our breath, right? We don't just want action for the sake of action, checking off things on the to-do list for the sake of it, right? But it is actually going a different way from white supremacy culture, breaking free from it. That is the most rigorous work of all that actually inspires our ease. It is work, but it is work that inspires rigorous ease and creates capacity inside of our practice. So, y'all, here comes the invitation. What's the work worthy of your breath? If the tools of white supremacy aren't viable, what are the tools we want to pick up and create with instead? Listen, empire is collapsing, and those that benefit from proximity to empire are terrified. As someone who grew up in middle class America, I don't exclude myself from that equation of terror. Right? It is far too easy to act on fear, cling to the myth of safety of the old world. But on the first page of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, she reminds us the dream is the truth. She goes on to say, then they act and do things accordingly. And I love that line. Instead of acting on fear, what if we acted on desire? This moment of collapse isn't just insisting we bear witness and watch it all fall. It is insisting that we create what comes after and act as if that dream is the truth. We are the world builders. We are the ones who will and are building the next universities as neighborhood schoolhouses, the next hospitals as holistic healing centers, the next art institutions as community-run spaces, and so on. If we are living in a world that rewards our participation in white supremacy culture, let our creative refusal, our creative response to be like to engage in work that where there is no room for it. There is no room for white supremacy culture. I want to say that again. If we are living in a world that rewards our participation in white supremacy culture, let our creative response be to engage in work where there is no room for it. This fall, let's retreat inside desire instead of fear. Just in time for this season of transition, I'm offering a guided one-on-one Cedar World retreat experience where we will work together closely on developing the income generating creative offer that will act as a seed for the world you're building, a backbeat to your creative practice. I will be sunsetting all my one-on-one offerings this winter. So this is a limited time offer to work together one-on-one on uncovering the work worthy of your breath and developing the paid creative offer that allows you to reclaim agency inside how you attract income you control. You're going to hear me talk a little bit more about controlling our income or just um, inviting a stream of income that we control inside of the workshop, because this was kind of my journey toward this work. I was a full-time artist. I had left my job in 2020, and I was surviving on checks from universities, art institutions, grants, fellowships, and even some corporations, nonprofits, organizations. And I realized I don't control not near one of these checks, right? Like at any point, it can be pulled for saying the quote unquote wrong thing. At any point, it could come late. At any point, it could stop. And in some cases, they did, right? In some cases, the grants dried up or whatever, contracts end, whatever, right? But what might it look like to reclaim our agency inside of how we attract income that we control, even if it's just one stream that we control, right? So if you want to learn how to create an income generating offer and learn even more about the one-on-one Cedar World Retreat experience, then register for the free world building workshop happening on Tuesday, September 23rd at noon Eastern Standard Time. This episode comes out on the Tuesday before the workshop. And inside this brand new workshop, y'all, you'll learn about the 4 different offer types you can develop. You'll learn how to align your paid offering with your income goals, right? And I also introduce you to some case studies of income generating offers created and launched by Cedar School alumni for even more inspiration that this is possible, y'all. I hope to see you there. Link is in the show notes to register. And as always, feel free to reach out at info@cedarschool.com with any questions that you may have about the workshop. Truly. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the podcast for the World Builders, where we dive into the spells and strategies of Black feminist world building while exploring how offering the skills and wisdom from our journey of transformation might seed, resource, and deepen creative lives of refusal. I firmly believe we all came into this world creative. We all came into this world with something to offer. And deep down, we all want to orient around politics of love instead of politics of fear. These are the beliefs we try to honor inside Cedar School. The best way to support the podcast is by sharing it with a friend or taking a screenshot or a screen recording of the episode and sharing it on social media so other world builders can find us. You will never, ever see a Cedar School ad while scrolling the metaverse. So I put my faith in you and the work instead. I want you to hear about Cedar School from a loved one you trust, not Meta, child. I'm much more interested in sustaining this work through word of mouth. I want to stay in business because a cousin is telling a cousin, is telling a hairdresser, is telling a neighbor, is telling, hello? Right? So tell a friend to tell a friend if you want to keep these episodes coming. I heard rating and leaving a review helps too. The second best way to support is by becoming a paid subscriber to the Cedar School Substack at $5 a month, but only if you have the financial capacity to do so. Until next week, y'all. So be it. See to it. Breathe through it.